Click, click, click. Hello everyone, and welcome to Maxim's Bakery and Restaurant here in Chinatown, Vancouver. Today, Chris and I are going to walk around and not shoot with the M10R as much as I love it. We're actually going to be shooting with these two cameras here. This is the SL3. Yeah, that's better. Thanks, Chris. SL3, SL2, and Chris is actually shooting on the SL2S. So this is the entire SL family, other than the original SL, which I do hope to own at some point. But those of us that are, maybe you are currently in the Leica ecosystem shooting a digital M. Maybe you shot with a film M and thought, hey, I'll give digital a try. So you got into a digital M body like an M10 or M11 or M9 or M240. And then you start thinking, well, you know, I want some video, or I want to adapt different lenses, and this rangefinder style focus doesn't really work for you. Then getting into the SL is a good option if you want to stick within the Leica ecosystem, and having the adapter, putting M mount lenses. Say you have a collection of M mount lenses, or R mount, or even any other like a Canon FD mount, Minolta MD mount. It's nice to have a full frame mirrorless body, but you may be wondering, should I get the new SL3? Which you can't because they're pretty much sold out, or should you go with the SL2? Now, kind of the easiest answer is, well, SL2, you can save a lot of money. And that's true, but there are other reasons why you would want to buy the SL2 over the SL3, and we're going to talk about it as we walk around Chinatown, Vancouver. But just sort of right off, the shooting experience is very similar. A couple of times I went and grabbed for the SL3, and actually I grabbed the SL2, and then vice versa. And so what I did was I actually put the coupe double rope strap on the SL2, because this is a thicker, heavier strap, and then I put the Wotancraft parachuter strap on the SL3, just so I would remember. But as well, aesthetically, of course, the SL3 has this extra dial on the top, but your shooting experience overall is going to feel the same. Other than the articulating screen on this, the extra dial on here, it's slightly smaller, it's slightly lighter, but there are compromises when you went smaller and lighter, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But just to quickly talk about Camera West, now they're the ones that provided me the M10R a couple of years ago on a long-term loan, and of course ended up loving the M10R, and so I decided to keep it, so I bought it. Thank you so much, Ben and Sean, for your help in for me purchasing this. And as well, the SL2, when the SL3 first came out, Camera West said, hey, we'd love for you to shoot around with the SL2 and tell us what you think. And so it's been a few months since the SL3 launch, and I've had the SL2 since then, and I just love using this camera. So we're gonna go out in the streets with Chris's SL2S, and so let's hit the streets of Chinatown, Vancouver now. Chinatown's a little bit boring. It kind of dies down after 6, and it doesn't come alive till 12, other than the weekends. On the weekends, it's great to come down here, but I like to come down during the weekday, so it's less busy. And also, it was raining before, and it still might rain today, so we're gonna hopefully not get rained on. But this is typical Vancouver weather, and this is a kind of, rain is not bad for the reds. It makes the reds kind of pop a little bit. So we'll try our best to get a few good shots, but we're gonna be embedding pictures throughout. I've been shooting with the SL3 since Germany. I shot it down in Las Vegas and as well here in Vancouver. And the SL2, I think in the last 5 years, I've taken some amazing photos with it. Oh, there's an awesome looking lady here coming towards us. I'm gonna try to make it look like I'm not photographing her. And so we will, hopefully face tracking, eye tracking is working because I'm not looking. But the autofocus on the SL3 is better than the SL2, but it's not, I think unless it's back to back, it's not a huge difference other than the tracking. The tracking is much better. But for me, I usually focus, single point, and then it's sort of a half press and then focus, or a scale focus, or I'm adapting M mount lenses, so it's not a big deal for me. But yeah, I mean, I love the SL3 mostly because of, it's not even the articulating screen, it's mostly because of this ISO dial here, or you can map it to something else, but I like ISO right here. And this 35 f2 Apo, this is a crunchy lens. It's so good, wide open, almost no chromatic aberration. I have photos of it that I shot with it in Las Vegas mostly, but amazing lens. Now I think I should switch over to the SL2. I just swapped over to the SL2. Now this is the camera I've been shooting with probably the last 3 or 4 months, and like any new camera, when I first got it, obviously I'm trying to figure out how I want to set it up. And then when I started shooting the SL3, everything was in the wrong place. I can custom function most things, but obviously this doesn't have that extra dial on this side, which I'm really used to using for ISO. But that's where the touch interface on the SL system is a huge advantage. Other manufacturers, they just don't do the UI as well as Leica. And when I did the SL3 media event in Wetzlar, part of the presentation was the UI. They upgraded it on the SL3, but Chris could attest as well, the UI on the SL2 and SL2S is awesome. And so being able to adjust ISO, white balance, those things really quickly. The thing I like about the Leicas is you could do a long press on any of the custom function buttons, and all the options for the custom function features that you want to access. And you can actually remove some stuff. There's some things maybe you never want to do custom functions on, so you just basically untick it and it will never come up. So you choose what you want to switch, and then you do a long press, and you could just in real time switch over. So maybe when you're shooting video, or if you're shooting certain types of stills, you want this. Like for instance, for me, this one on the thumb is usually APS-C to full frame 35mm switching between the two, and it's a toggle. And what that does is when I have the 24mm f2, on 35mm, it's basically, well, it's 24mm, but when I punch into APS-C, it becomes a 36mm. So I'm getting 24 to 36. Now, obviously, it's cropping in, so you lose resolution, but with 47 megapixel in this, you don't lose that much. I think it still ends up being a 20 megapixel image. And so that's how I like this rear button here, this rear custom function. But you have 2 more over here, and you have 2 on the top, and you have an extra FN button on the back here, and also touch screen. So in the end, of course, I love that extra dial dedicated to ISO, but for me, I love the minimalist design of this and how easy it is to custom function the camera the way that you want to shoot. So one of the things that I appreciate about the SL2 over the SL3 is, and it can go both ways, is that it still uses dual SD card slots. So the CF Express Type B card is better bang for your buck if you're going like 512, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte cards. They're much faster, the throughput is very fast, and for the price that you pay now, the price has come down quite a bit, but most of us still have SD cards. And so be able to have dual SD cards, either if it's mirroring, or if it's, one's finishing up and the other one's going, or you put in JPEGs, DNG, video, stills, it makes sense to have dual card slots. So I think that is maybe the deal breaker for some people who don't want to get into buying a different type of card. Fundamentally, the cameras work very similar, so it's not like a Sony upgrade. So you're thinking 5-6 years from the previous model and you expect the kind of leaps and bounds in technology that you would get from something like a Sony. But what happens is when you get leaps and bounds in technology between the models, the old model is worthless. So when the SL2 came out, was it like 2017 or 2018? Yeah. If you think of a Sony camera equivalent of that era, it's worthless. Nobody wants it. The SL2 is still worth quite a bit of money because the changes are kind of incremental. People buy Leicas because they're Leicas. They don't buy them because it's better than Sony or better than Canon. And because of it, even like a M9, which is, how old is that camera? It still has a lot of value because fundamentally it still works like an M11. And the original SL, the SL2 and the SL3 fundamentally works exactly the same. And if you're doing very narrow focus stuff, like if you're doing just basic stills like me, 24 megapixels, 47 megapixels, 60 megapixels, you're gonna shoot it exactly the same. I don't feel like I'm shooting any differently. Now, if you're a professional and have very specific needs, I think then the SL3 will make sense. If you have an M11 and a Q3, it has the same 60 megapixels. Color science is very similar processors, 3 resolution. But if you're like me, M10R, if you have an older M, SL2 is going to match whatever your Leica ecosystem is, especially if you have an adapter and you just have this huge collection of M-mount lenses. Then it doesn't really matter if you have an SL3 or an SL2, other than very specific things like, this doesn't have an articulating screen, but, a lot of cameras don't have articulating screens when it comes to Leica, and we still love their cameras. So there actually is an upgrade on the SL2 from the SL3 because one of the priorities of the SL3 was to make it smaller and more compact. They actually did have to redesign the IBIS mech as well as the shutter. So I did a shutter test previously, but the shutter, I could hear it here. You can hear it. There you go. I'll do it again in my studio. If you notice, the shutter sound was, listen to that. And here is the SL2. Definitely a different sound, right? But the shutter on the SL2 sounds nicer than the SL3. Now that is subjective, of course, but in terms of actual performance, the SL3 actually has 5 stops of IBIS. The SL2 has 5.5 stops. So not a huge difference, but because the IBIS mech is different, IBIS is going to be slightly better on the SL2. As well as the shutter itself has been redesigned, and the shutter mechanism, the top flash sync on the SL2 is 1/250th of a second versus the SL3, which is only 1/200th. Again, not a big deal, but if you are doing a lot of flash sync photography and you're always utilizing that 1/200th of a second, 1/250th of a second in the SL2, well, it's only 1/200th on the SL3. And so that's one of the things that is actually better on the SL2 versus the SL3. And really the shutter mechanism is a really important part of the camera. So when I'm shooting with the SL2 and the SL3, I prefer the sound of the SL2. Thank you so much, Camera West, for giving us this camera here, as well as Chris's camera, to shoot all these videos. Go check out their online store. They do a weekly drop on their pre-owned cameras, and some of the cameras are in such good condition. They actually have Leica to warranty it, like up to a 2-year warranty on a select few SL2 cameras and other cameras as well. So check it out, weekly drops, sign up on their email as well as texting. And so thank you again, Chris, for following me along. Thanks for joining us here in Chinatown, Vancouver. We'll shoot more videos on the SL2 as well as the SL2S that was shot entirely for this video here. And if we can get a hold of it again, the new SL3. Thanks for watching and happy shooting. Man, the shutter just sounds so good. I love the sound of the shutter. All right, that's it.